Hi there. The M23 movement and the conflict in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. When people talk of the Democratic Republic of Congo, what comes to mind is the decades-long civil war in the eastern part of the country. For most people, these wars are a result of rebellions from disgruntled communities. There are over 100 armed groups, sometimes referred to as self-defense militias. They operate in eastern Congo, and their grievances include, among others, access to land and competition for mineral resources such as gold and coltan. The M23 is not your average armed group. Its objectives are not only local, but include taking over power and control of all of the Democratic Republic of Congo. In recent months, the conflict has escalated with close to 7 million people fleeing their homes and living in camps for the displaced. The M23 has transformed itself into a conventional army far beyond the means and reach of a rebel movement, fueling suspicion that a state actor is behind the group. Join me as I trace the origins of rebel movements in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, how Rwanda, in its quest for territory and the mineral riches of the eastern Congo, has managed to create a succession of proxy rebel movements culminating in the notorious M23. Eastern Congo has long been a haven to a myriad of rebel groups, starting with the Kwilu and Simba rebellions in the mid-1960s and their futile attempts to overthrow the central government in Kinshasa. Mobutu Sese Seko, in power for over 30 years, was by the beginning of 1996 plagued by poor health, and the then Zaire was falling apart from decades of misrule and corruption. Refugees fleeing the aftermath of the genocide included former soldiers, many of whom were accused of having committed atrocities. The influx of refugees worsened an already precarious situation. At about the same time, Congolese of Rwandan origin, who had for decades known no other home other than Eastern Congo, were facing a growing hostility from their Congolese neighbors. Laurent Kabila capitalized on this simmering tension and put together a coalition of rebel groups, the Alliance of Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Congo, popularly known by its French acronym of AFDL. Although nominally a Congolese rebellion, the real forces behind the AFDL movement were Rwanda and Uganda, with Laurent Kabila merely a figurehead. By May 1997, Kabila had, with his Rwandan allies, defeated Mobutu's soldiers and were firmly in control in Kinshasa. As most residents of Kinshasa resented domination by the Rwandans, it did not take long for Kabila to fall out with his Rwandan allies, whom he gave their marching orders in early August of 1998. With Kabila no longer useful as a puppet, the Rwandans put together the Rally for Congolese Democracy (RCD), led by Professor Wamba Diawamba, whose members were mostly former AFDL members, including the Banyamulenge. Kabila by this time had found allies in the region, and when his position in Kinshasa came under threat in early August of 1998, his Zimbabwean, Angolan, and Namibian allies came to his rescue, and thus began the second chapter of the Congo War. With so much at stake in the form of mineral riches, it did not take long for the Rwandans to turn against their Ugandan allies. For 6 days in May of 2000, they fought a series of battles vying for control of the eastern city of Kisangani. This Uganda-Rwanda rivalry for control of eastern Congo was reflected in the split in the RCD itself, with one faction based in Goma referred to RDC-Goma and led by Emile Ilunga, while the other faction in Kisangani remained under Wamba Diawamba's control. The Ugandans later switched horses and opted to put their weight behind Jean-Pierre Bemba and his Movement for the Liberation of Congo, MLC. While almost everyone is agreed that by 2000, Kabila had managed to fall out with his allies, what is open to dispute is who killed him on the fateful afternoon of at the 16th of January 2001. Laurent Desire Kabila was succeeded by his son Joseph Kabila, who by 2003 had got the warring parties to engage in negotiations to end the conflict. The negotiations were overseen by the South Africans in the casino resort of Sun City. This led to a fragile peace. After the Sun City Accords, a sense of relative peace and calm descended on eastern Congo, but that did not last long. Elections in 2006 carried out as part of the Sun City Accords were won by Joseph Kabila. Disputes followed, and various factions of the RDC-Goma vowed to go back to the bush and fight. General Laurent Nkunda, a Congolese of Tutsi origin and a former senior officer in the RDC-Goma faction, formed the National Congress for the Defense of the People, the CNDP. Nkunda had an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court for the massacre of 160 civilians in the city of Kisangani. He claimed that his major objective was fighting the rebel group, the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, known through its French acronym as the FDLR. At one point or another, Rwanda has accused the government of the DRC of providing shelter and arms to the FDLR. Nkunda, however, lost the support of his Rwandan allies when he started making extravagant claims that he was not only in eastern DRC to protect ethnic minority Tutsis, but was after protecting all Congolese people, and that his goal was to eventually topple the central government in Kinshasa. The Rwandans eventually arrested Nkunda, and the CNDP leadership passed over to Bosco Ntaganda, a Tutsi born in Rwanda and nicknamed the Terminator for his brutality, as I have said earlier. The local Tutsi population, known as the Banyamulenge, have been in eastern Congo since the 1960s. Some came to Congo earlier than that. They are concentrated in the rural areas of Masisi and Rutshuru in the two Kivu provinces. Their grievances are centered on their fellow Congolese disputing their claims of citizenship in the Congo. They push for the autonomy of the two Kivu provinces and demand leadership of political and military structures in the two Kivu provinces. These grievances were addressed in the form of an agreement signed between the DRC government and the leadership of the CNDP on the 23rd of March 2012. The agreement signed by the DRC government and the CNDP was never fully implemented, and in response to this, the CNDP now started calling itself the M23 movement. The M23 escalated its attacks as a response to the breakdown of the agreement. It attacked the city of Goma in late November 2012 and held it for 10 days. After an international outcry, the United Nations Security Council approved plans to send an intervention brigade of 3,000 troops. The M23 suffered heavy losses. Cut off from support by Rwanda, the M23 declared a ceasefire, and its military chief Sultani Makenga fled to Rwanda. Makenga is a Tutsi from the Masisi region in eastern Congo, and he joined the Rwanda Patriotic Front in the early 1990s. Talks held in Kampala in late 2013 as a follow-up to the 23 March Accord broke down on a question of what to call what had been agreed earlier on. The DRC government labeled what the parties had agreed on merely an agreement. The M23, on the other hand, insisted that the DRC government had made a legally binding agreement and had to honor its commitments. The DRC government insisted further it would not agree to the demands of a criminal group, although the government of President Tshisekedi has long insisted that the M23 is a terrorist organization and would not negotiate with it. That did not stop it secretly hosting an M23 delegation in Kinshasa in late 2020. The DRC government has insisted that the M23, if they were to surrender, they have to do so without any conditions, and its 6,000 fighters were to be demobilized and integrated into the regular army, the FARDC. Talks broke down on the question of posts for its top leadership. After its defeat in 2013, the M23 lay dormant for close to a decade, only reviving itself in late 21. The question that arises is why did the M23 suddenly resume attacks in late 2021? The M23, it has claimed that it had no option but to defend itself in response to attacks by the FARDC, the regular Congolese army, after the declaration of martial law in the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri. However, the most likely explanation for the revival of the M23 is Rwanda resuming its support for the rebel movement. A panel of experts assembled by the United Nations has documented Rwanda's support for the M23. This includes the transfer of arms and ammunition, Rwanda facilitating the recruitment of locals into the M23, and its deployment of its own Rwanda Defense Force soldiers inside Congolese territory. Other evidence provided include Rwandan support for the M23, which includes surface-to-air missile defense systems belonging to the Rwanda Defense Forces, and these were stationed inside Congolese territory. Rwanda, however, strongly denied these allegations. Interestingly, the Rwanda Defense Forces have since 2015 been allowed by the DRC government to conduct covert operations against the FDLR rebels on Congolese soil. However, that arrangement was terminated by the government of President Tshisekedi in 2020, and Rwanda, in response, resumed its support for the M23 due to the termination of that agreement. A related question that has been asked by most people is why is Rwanda even involved in Congo at all? If its claims that the M23 is a wholly Congolese movement were taken at face value. Part of the answer lies in the leadership in Rwanda, which claim that the current borders in the Great Lakes area have separated Tutsi communities and by implication have to be redrawn. Not surprisingly, these claims raise alarm in Kinshasa, with some in government circles taking this to mean that Rwanda props up the M23 in an effort to encourage the breakaway of the two Kivu provinces or even the breakup of the DRC itself. Then there is the rivalry between Uganda and Rwanda, who both consider Eastern Congo their backyard and fight for supremacy. On the 21st of February 2020 at Katuna in Uganda, President Tshisekedi met with Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, and the two agreed that Uganda would pave 1,882 kilometers of roads in North Kivu, linking Ruchuru and Goma. Kagame considers this a threat to Rwanda's interest in North Kivu. Since its first invasion of the Congo in late 1996, Rwanda has created the so-called Congo Desk for the exploitation of minerals in eastern Congo. The M23 and its RDF allies occupy territory in Ruchuru, Rubaya, and Masisi, where artisanal miners dig for coltan under the watchful eye of M23 fighters. What makes the Eastern Congo so attractive to a succession of rebel groups as well as state actors such as Rwanda and Uganda is the region's mineral riches. The DRC is potentially the richest country in the world, sitting on untapped reserves of precious metals and minerals including diamonds, cobalt, zinc, tin, and gold. The Democratic Republic of Congo holds a strategic position in the clean energy revolution. Without its supply of coltan-derived metals of tungsten, tin, and tantalum, most major Western powers would struggle to make the transition to clean energy. Tantalum is used in the manufacture of components for smartphones and consumer electronics, and crucially for batteries used in electric vehicles. The Democratic Republic of Congo, due to long decades of misrule and decay of state institutions, cannot guarantee the world a constant supply of coltan. Rwanda, despite having little deposits of the mineral in its own territory, guarantees that supply. The DRC government has complained that Rwanda is involved in trafficking and smuggling of minerals from eastern Congo, and it says it loses close to $1 billion American dollars a year. While most observers point to the regular Congolese armed forces as ill-equipped and lacking a formal chain of command, President Tshisekedi has made significant efforts at reforming and then equipping the Congolese military. He has purchased drones from China and revived the Congolese Air Force. Congolese fighter jets and drones have been so effective at countering the combined M23 and Rwanda Defense Force threat. This military build-up has led to fears of a direct war between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and this is likely to draw in neighbouring countries. On 24 January 2024, the Rwandans shot at a Congolese fighter jet, claiming it was violating Congolese airspace. In the light of increasing capabilities of the Congolese military, the United States in late November 2023 felt compelled to ask both sides to reduce their military build-up, with the DRC being asked to stop its use of drones, while the Rwandans were asked to withdraw their troops from Congolese soil. Meanwhile, the regional economic bloc, the East African Regional Force, known by its acronym ECRAF, had deployed a force of 12,000 troops in December of 2022 in an effort to ease tensions. However, ECRAF was viewed with suspicion by the DRC government and was accused of sympathizing with the M23 and its Rwandan allies. As evidence of bias, the Democratic Republic of Congo government pointed to ECRAF not directly fighting the M23. To the DRC government, these suspicions were confirmed when, on the 8th of January 2024, ECRAF, during its withdrawal, handed over its bases and equipment to the M23. This enabled the M23 to capture the strategic town of Sake to the west of Goma, as well as Minova to the south. The M23 has struggled to gain widespread support even among the Congolese Tutsis it claims to protect. Rwanda, on the other hand, has never been fully able to convince the world that the M23 is Congolese and is homegrown. This changed with the arrival of Corneille Nangaa. Corneille Nangaa announced the formation of the Congo River Alliance, known as AFC using its French acronym. This was in a hotel in Nairobi in December of 2023. The DRC government, in response, recalled its ambassador in protest. While the leadership in Kinshasa considers Nangaa a Rwandan puppet, the Rwandans could now claim to the rest of the world that the M23 is a Congolese creation. They could say that this because Nangaa, a leading figure in the former Kabila administration, was since February of 2024 now leading the political wing of the M23. Nangaa took over from long-time leader of the M23, Bertrand Bisimwa. The resurgence of the M23 has prompted the Southern Africa Development Community to send troops to eastern DRC. On the 12th of December 2024, South Africa deployed a force of nearly 3,000 troops, with Tanzania and Malawi pledging troops. Despite the deployment of South African-led force, there has been little fighting that has taken place on the ground, with the M23 reportedly making gains on the ground and capturing the towns of Sake and Minova, as I have said earlier on, which are key supply routes into Goma. Many interpret this not as a threat to take over the city of Goma as the M23 did in 2012, but as efforts by the M23 to starve the population of Goma and force the government of President Tshisekedi to the negotiating table. A negotiated settlement of the conflict has been elusive. On the 11th of March 2024, President Kagame traveled to Rwanda and met with João Lourenço, and the two agreed that Kagame would meet for talks with President Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi has, however, insisted that before any negotiation can start, Rwanda has to pull its troops out from the eastern DRC. The M23 has to be disarmed and then disbanded, conditions which Kagame seemed not to be in a hurry to comply with. Kagame himself has demanded that the M23 should be represented at the negotiating table. a request the government in Kinshasa has contemptuously dismissed as giving credibility to a bunch of criminals. With both sides not shifting an inch on their demands, a military solution to the conflict remains the only option. Thank you for listening in and following this piece. If you have got this far, please drop your comments below and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.